It's often said that you never truly know how bright a star can shine until it's gone. And in the case of Carolyn Bessette-Kennedy, many people only began to understand the depth of her luminous presence, the grace, the mystery, the elegance, after the world lost her far too soon. Though she never sought the spotlight, she found herself thrust into it when she married America's unofficial prince, John F. Kennedy Jr. Their union seemed like a fairy tale for a new generation. The dashing heir of the Kennedy legacy and the effortlessly chic fashion publicist who could stop traffic with her understated style. Even if you weren't deeply tuned into celebrity news in the 1990s, you likely remember the media frenzy around Carolyn's image. Her sleek blonde bob, her minimal makeup, those impeccable slip dresses. Yet beneath that polished surface lay a deeply private individual who wrestled with her own anxieties, media pressures, and the weight of a last name that was not even hers, yet overshadowed her entire existence. Hers is a story both mesmerizing and heartbreaking, one that still carries a poignant resonance with anyone who has ever felt overshadowed by expectations or crushed by the relentless gaze of the public eye. To fully appreciate Carolyn's story, we have to travel back to a very particular moment in American culture, the 1990s, a time when celebrity tabloids dominated supermarket checkout lines, and paparazzi followed every move of the most talked-about socialites. Princess Diana was still one of the most photographed women in the world. The public's appetite for inside peeks into glamorous lives seemed insatiable, and the Kennedys for decades had been America's most dramatic, larger-than-life dynasty. Into this swirl of paparazzi flashes, glossy magazine covers, and national fascination stepped Carolyn, a self-possessed fashion publicist from a comparatively modest background. She was not an actress, not a singer, not even a seasoned socialite. She was an ordinary woman in extraordinary circumstances, a striking modern-style icon who found herself navigating one of the most storied families in American history. Carolyn Jean Bessette was born on January 7, 1966, in White Plains, New York, and spent her childhood mostly in Greenwich, Connecticut. Her upbringing looked perfectly normal from the outside. Her father, William Bessette, was an engineer, and her mother, Anne, held a job as a school administrator. She had two older twin sisters, Lisa and Lauren. For many people, the Bessettes were the classic American suburban family, financially comfortable but not wealthy, caring little of the glitz that would later attach itself to Carolyn's name. Yet even as a child, Carolyn had a sense of poise and presence that people noticed. Former classmates from St. Mary High School in Greenwich would later recall how, even at a young age, Carolyn possessed a natural magnetism. She wasn't loud or showy. She had more of a quiet confidence, a way of holding herself that hinted at maturity beyond her years. She attended Boston University after high school, exploring a possible path in elementary education initially, although her true passion would soon turn toward fashion. It was during college that Carolyn took a part-time job in retail, and that fateful move would set her on a course toward the fashion world. Sales associates and coworkers quickly recognized she was more than just another enthusiastic salesperson. Carolyn seemed to have an eye for what worked and what didn't, not just for herself but for everyone who came into the store. She was the friend who would tell you, in the gentlest terms, why that jacket was all wrong for your silhouette or why a particular shade of lipstick brought out your best features. Carolyn's gift for style was organic. She wasn't necessarily the top of her class academically, but there was an emotional intelligence she brought to everything she did, especially fashion. This sensitivity would later help her make valuable connections with designers, reporters, and stylists, paving the way for a bigger, more glamorous career. Her first big break came shortly after graduating from Boston University in 1988. She began working at Calvin Klein in Boston, initially in a lower-level position. But it wouldn't be long before the higher-ups at Calvin Klein noticed her potential. Carolyn had a refined, modern look that aligned perfectly with the brand's minimalist aesthetic of the 1990s. At that time, Calvin Klein was more than just a fashion label. It was a cultural phenomenon, thanks to provocative ad campaigns featuring celebrities and supermodels. By the early to mid-1990s, Carolyn had moved to the company's New York office, serving as a publicist and liaison to high-end clients. She also provided personal shopping and styling advice to VIPs. In an industry where so many were trying to stand out with loud designs or bold prints, Carolyn's approach, understated, elegant, quietly confident, was exactly on trend. The brand recognized this synergy and entrusted her with client relationships that demanded grace under pressure. Friends who knew Carolyn during this period speak of a young woman who was constantly juggling tasks, booking appointments, organizing client fittings, and attending exclusive parties. Despite this fast-paced lifestyle, Carolyn remained relatively grounded. A colleague from that era recalled how, even when working overtime or traveling for trunk shows, Carolyn took time to inquire how others were doing. She wasn't gunning solely for personal advancement. However, it was clear she was ambitious in her own calm way. She wanted to excel, and with her innate eye for style and warm presence, she did. Of course, the Carolyn Bessette, who was climbing the ranks at Calvin Klein, was still unknown to the tabloids until a particular evening in the early 1990s when she was introduced to John F. Kennedy Jr. There are different accounts of how they first crossed paths. Some say it was at a charity gala. Others claim it was through a mutual friend at a private dinner. Either way, from the moment they met, there was a sort of gravitational pull. John F. Kennedy Jr., often referred to simply as John, was American royalty. Handsome, athletic, heir to the Camelot mystique, son of a beloved president whose memory the nation still cherished. He was also Harvard-educated and carried a certain aura of charm, humility, and good humor. Carolyn, on the other hand, had a grace and mystery that set her apart from the many socialites who vied for John's attention. She was confident enough in her own skin not to be rattled by his fame, at least not at first. Their chemistry was immediate, yet they took their time building a friendship that eventually developed into a romantic connection. By the mid-1990s, rumors began swirling in the pages of gossip columns that John F. Kennedy Jr. was dating a leggy blonde publicist from Calvin Klein. Paparazzi snapshots caught fleeting glimpses of the two together, strolling through Tribeca's cobblestone streets, laughing in a quiet corner at a Manhattan restaurant, or slipping into a charity event together. Everywhere they went, cameras followed. For Carolyn, this was a new reality. Even though she worked in fashion, a public-facing industry, her own personal life had never been subjected to the unrelenting glare of national attention. Friends would later remark that Carolyn found the paparazzi presence nerve-wracking. She was a private soul who disliked being singled out in public. And yet, by dating John, her face suddenly appeared in tabloids sold in every convenience store across America. In September 1996, on a small island off the coast of Georgia, Carolyn and John were married in a secret ceremony at the tiny First African Baptist Church on Cumberland Island. The wedding was as intimate as it could be under the circumstances. Barely 40 guests attended. Carolyn wore a silk crepe slip dress by Narciso Rodriguez, then a relatively unknown designer whom she supported wholeheartedly. That dress would become iconic, simple, form-fitting, and impeccably elegant, a perfect representation of Carolyn's aesthetic. The wedding photos that eventually leaked to the public depicted a couple radiating love and joy. And yet, for all the romance in those images, friends close to the pair noted how seriously Carolyn debated whether she wanted to marry into a family so laden with history and the weight of public scrutiny. She loved John deeply, but she was keenly aware of how the Kennedy name could swallow up one's personal identity. Still, she went ahead with the marriage, and for a brief moment, it felt like a real-life fairy tale. Of course, fairy tales often mask hidden tensions. In the years following their wedding, Carolyn and John became one of the most photographed couples in New York. He launched George magazine around that time, attempting to carve out his own identity separate from politics, an identity that combined media, commentary, and a sense of style reminiscent of his father's era, but updated for the 1990s. Carolyn, meanwhile, struggled to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Her personal style became the subject of fashion editorials, with columnists praising her minimalism, her neutral color palette, the effortless way she could pair a simple turtleneck with a pencil skirt and look like she stepped off a runway. Yet the more they praised her, the more the paparazzi followed her every move. She could barely walk her dog without the flashbulbs popping. Though she tried to soldier on, the personal strain was apparent to those who knew her. Friends would see Carolyn cringe at unflattering tabloid headlines or scowling paparazzi photos taken when she was caught off guard. Reports circulated that she and John had intense public spats, most famously one in Central Park, where they were spotted arguing loudly. Some of these stories may have been exaggerated by the tabloids, but there was a kernel of truth. Their marriage was under enormous stress. Neither John nor Carolyn had real privacy anymore. He was used to a certain level of attention, having grown up in the Kennedy spotlight. But even for him, it was relentless. For Carolyn, it was entirely new, and it left her feeling at times lonely, scared, and trapped. There were rumors, never confirmed, that she occasionally turned to substance use as an escape. Other whispers hinted at tensions with certain members of the extended Kennedy family, or with John's sister, Caroline Kennedy Schlossberg, though these remain largely speculative. One lesser-known story from those years, shared by a friend who once accompanied Carolyn on a trip to London for a charity fashion event, provides a window into her state of mind. The friend recalled that Carolyn had trouble sleeping the entire trip, pacing the hotel room at odd hours of the night. She was anxious, overwhelmed by the knowledge that the second she stepped outside, paparazzi would be there to chronicle everything from her hairstyle to her mood. She confided to this friend that she sometimes felt like she was failing at being Mrs. Kennedy, a heartbreaking statement from someone who never asked to be put on such a pedestal. This anecdote shows the complexity of her situation, beloved by fans of glamour and style, yet deeply uneasy with her loss of anonymity and the unpredictable demands placed on her by both John's family and the prying public. Within the Kennedy circle, Carolyn was navigating a fine line. The Kennedys are known for their close-knit relationships, grand get-togethers, and strong personalities. Coming from a more modest background, Carolyn didn't always feel she fit in. Some accounts suggest she tried valiantly to be part of the gatherings at the Kennedy compound in Hyannisport, yet she also needed space to breathe. And with John's relentless schedule, tensions occasionally flared between them, as any young couple might experience, but magnified 1,000 times by paparazzi and societal expectations. Despite the ups and downs, Carolyn remained a style and cultural force. In fact, her minimalistic approach arguably influenced an entire generation of women's fashion trends in the late 1990s. She was part of a wave that valued sleek lines, neutral colors, and understated elegance over the flashy designs that had been so prevalent in the 80s. Fashion journalists lauded her as a modern, Audrey Hepburn, elegant but with a contemporary spin that made her uniquely Carolyn. She wasn't shy about praising designers she believed in, such as Narciso Rodriguez and Yohji Yamamoto, and that public support helped propel some of them to greater recognition. Beyond the glitz, she was also quietly involved in philanthropic endeavors, occasionally appearing at charity galas or fundraisers, especially those supported by her husband or the broader Kennedy family. She seldom gave interviews. She preferred letting John or others in the family handle public statements. But in the few times she did speak publicly, she came across as kind, measured, and thoughtful, even if one could sense her underlying discomfort with the spotlight. By the late 1990s, it was no secret that the media's relentless scrutiny of their marriage had taken its toll. Some tabloids declared their union on the verge of collapse, while others claimed they were planning to renew their vows. In truth, the reality was somewhere in between. They were just another couple experiencing disagreements, emotional highs and lows, and outside stressors beyond their control. Their love was real, but so were the pressures. Whatever private challenges they faced, we'll likely never fully know, because in many ways they were both quite protective of each other's reputations. John, for all his easygoing charm, fiercely guarded Carolyn's privacy, and Carolyn, for all her nerves, remained deeply supportive of John's dreams, including his publication George, even when it demanded large portions of his time and energy. On July 16, 1999, tragedy struck. Carolyn, John, and her older sister Lauren were scheduled to attend the wedding of John's cousin Rory Kennedy in Hyannisport. They boarded John's small Piper Saratoga plane at Essex County Airport in New Jersey. John, a licensed pilot, was flying. None of them would reach their destination. That evening, in hazy conditions, the plane disappeared off the radar over the Atlantic Ocean near Martha's Vineyard. An intense search and rescue mission was launched, captivating the nation. For days, Americans watched the news in shock, hoping against hope. But on July 21st, the wreckage was found, and the bodies of John, Carolyn, and Lauren were recovered. The final NTSB report pointed to pilot error and spatial disorientation as the probable causes of the crash. In the immediate aftermath, the world reeled. The Kennedys were once again plunged into grief, echoing the sense of national mourning that had followed so many of their family tragedies in the past. For Carolyn's family, the loss was devastating on multiple levels. Not only had they lost their daughter and sister, but Lauren Bessette was also taken in the crash, a double heartbreak that few can fathom. In the swirl of media coverage, some outlets painted Carolyn unfairly, insinuating that she had somehow exacerbated John's inattention as a pilot, or that their marriage troubles might have contributed to tensions leading up to the flight. Those who knew Carolyn were outraged. This was a catastrophic accident, a horrifying twist of fate that robbed three bright, vibrant individuals of their future. The families devastated closed ranks, and the public soon turned its attention to national mourning rather than finger-pointing. For many Americans, Carolyn's death was overshadowed by the fact that she died alongside a Kennedy. Yet among those who followed her from her Calvin Klein days, or admired her sense of style, or who simply recognized her as a distinct individual, it was clear that a unique presence had been lost. She was not merely John F. Kennedy Jr.'s wife. She was Carolyn, an intelligent, creative, empathetic soul who happened to be thrust into a role she never asked for. As news of the plane crash spread, the paparazzi that had once tormented Carolyn seemed to vanish in a blink, replaced by solemn tributes in newspapers and magazines. Calvin Klein and other designers she had worked with offered memorial statements, remembering Carolyn as a kind, astute professional who brought gentleness to an often cutthroat industry. Friends mourned the witty confidant, who was always there to lend a listening ear and an honest opinion. In the wake of such a tremendous loss, people tried to piece together the intangible legacy that Carolyn left behind. While John's place in the national consciousness was clear, he was the last living son of President John F. Kennedy, a man with a seemingly limitless future. Carolyn's legacy was more subtle but equally enduring. Her style influenced countless women who wanted that effortless, less is more look. She became an emblem of quiet sophistication, an almost mystical figure whose fashion choices continue to inspire. Even decades later, you'll see glossy magazines referencing Carolyn's iconic slip wedding dress or the way she wore a crisp white shirt with black pants, looking unassumingly radiant. But her impact went beyond fashion. In a broader sense, Carolyn's life represented the complicated intersection of private identity and public scrutiny. She was a cautionary tale in how the media can consume someone who never sought out stardom in the first place. Many people still wonder how Carolyn's life might have unfolded if that plane had landed safely. Perhaps she and John would have worked through their challenges and come out stronger on the other side. Maybe she would have launched her own brand or dedicated herself to charity work, free from the constraints of her day-to-day publicist role. She might have even started a family, forging a new chapter of the Kennedy saga that embraced both John's heritage and her own understated style. The tragedy is that these possibilities will forever remain in the realm of speculation. In the years since her passing, historical debates continue about the final months of Carolyn's life, especially regarding the rumors of marital issues or potential separation. Friends and family have offered conflicting perspectives. Some say she was quite happy and that the couple was moving toward a more peaceful existence, while others claim the marriage was under severe strain. There are even unsubstantiated stories about last-minute changes to flight plans, or how Carolyn felt uneasy about flying that night. None of these rumors alter the fundamental heartbreak of what actually transpired. They do, however, highlight the intense fascination people still have with every angle of a Kennedy-related story, even decades later. In remembering Carolyn today, many people focus on the quiet moments that defined who she truly was. Friends talk about her generosity and sense of humor, the fact that she loved small dinner parties far more than grand galas. Some recall how she would blush when complimented on her appearance as if she never fully realized the extent of her own allure. Others remember her devotion to her family, how she was protective of her mother and sisters. Indeed, she cherished her connection with her siblings so much that when her sister Lauren had an event or needed Carolyn's advice, Carolyn was there. Tragically, that bond proved fatal for both of them that July night. But it also speaks to the loyalty and love that shaped Carolyn's life. Even in a purely aesthetic sense, Carolyn's image endures. Modern minimalist fashion blogs still cite her as a primary muse. Her wedding look, from the sleek dress to the simple bun and long, understated veil, is consistently ranked among the greatest bridal styles of all time. Social media accounts dedicated to vintage fashion frequently post her street-style photos. That signature black coat, the dark sunglasses perched on her nose, the clean lines of her outfits, always so effortless, always drawing praise from a new generation of admirers who were too young to witness her era in real time. That continual fascination speaks to the timelessness of her approach, an elegance that never ages. From a broader cultural and historical standpoint, Carolyn's story intersects with the tail end of a particular kind of paparazzi culture that would see a dramatic turning point just 2 years earlier with the tragic death of Princess Diana in 1997. The parallels are eerie. Both women were constantly hounded by photographers, Both experienced difficulty coping with extreme public interest in their personal lives, and both died in shocking accidents that made global headlines. Though the details of each story are unique, they highlight society's sometimes unhealthy obsession with celebrities, an obsession that can exact a dreadful price on those in the spotlight. Even now, if you walk the streets of Soho or Tribeca, you might hear someone mention Carolyn's name when discussing timeless style or reflecting on the cultural mood of the 1990s. The conversation will often turn wistful, touched by the knowledge that something quite special was lost. When Carolyn, John, and Lauren vanished into the dark Atlantic waters on that humid summer night, that sense of lost potential remains a powerful current in her legacy. Yet so does the inspiration we can draw from her life. She reminds us that elegance is not about chasing trends, but about authenticity. That love can motivate us to take risks we never dreamed of, and that life is as fragile as it is precious. To truly appreciate Carolyn's story is to hold both the beauty and the sorrow in equal measure, to see her as neither a tragic footnote in Kennedy history, nor just a fashion plate on some best-dressed list, but as a real person who navigated adversity with humility and style. She endures in the collective memory because she was and remains a poignant figure whose experiences speak to universal themes of love, identity, privacy, and the high stakes of public life. And in that sense, Carolyn Bessette-Kennedy is far more than just a name in a headline from decades ago. She is a quiet, graceful reminder of the best and worst parts of our cultural fixation with fame, and of our capacity to empathize with a stranger's private struggles once we look past the magazine covers to discover the human being within. And that's all for today's video. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. See you next time.